Hello. For my project, I chose to do rejection sensitivity. Going through the whole list, there were a bunch of different topics that kind of caught my attention, but this one was probably the top of my list. So yeah, let's talk about it. Pretty much what rejection sensitivity is defined as, it is the disposition to anxiously expect, readily perceived, intense react to social rejection, which that's the term that Downey and Feldman ended up coming up with in 1996. But pretty much what it is this anxious feeling when someone is rejected that can cause them to act pretty erratically compared to, someone who is lower RS when put in the same sort of situation, whether that's rejection from family, maybe a social setting like a workplace, a friend group, or your employer or your siblings. There's a lot that can involve that. So yeah, as I mentioned before, Downey and Feldman are pretty much the pioneers of this topic. They did a lot of work in 1996 with this word switch on a computer. Pretty cool experiment, and it kind of just what that study did was basically tie RS to higher levels of aggression and hostility, because that's a trait that's displayed oftentimes when someone who's higher RS is met with rejection. So looking over situations of like, when would we find RS in a certain individual? We can look at a situation where you have two people who work together, right? They already have a relationship. We're just gonna call them Jeff and Sydney, right? Jeff really likes Sydney. Sydney likes Jeff, but just not in the same way. And they end up spending time outside of work together, maybe going on a coffee date, a walk, nothing that's super relationship-y, but they're doing things. And Jeff decides to kind of pop the question like, hey, will you be my girlfriend? And Sydney's pretty off put by this, and she's like, oh, this isn't really what I thought. Like, we can totally hang out and be friends, but I can't be your partner. And normally when someone who's lower RS in the situation, they'd be like, damn, that sucks, kind of continue on, maybe remove you from their life. But someone who's higher RS will act in an aggressive, kind of hostile manner almost, of being like, they're super just upset and distraught that you would even reject them. And this can stem from like, maybe there is a childhood experience where they felt rejected a lot, whether that was like finding friends at school, whatever. So while doing research, there were a lot of cool articles and stuff that came up, but there was one that really stuck out to me, and it was titled Rejection Sensitivity and the Rejection Hostility Link in Romantic Relationships by Rainier Romero Kenyas, Geraldine Downey, Kathy Beerson, Oslam Aduct, and N. Kane Jange. So pretty much what the study found in terms of psychology words is it links rejection sensitivity to attentional and perceptual processes that underlie the processing of social information. Pretty much what that means in a more simplified term is RS is a cognitive affective processing disposition. So your brain kind of doesn't process the rejection the same as someone who is lower RS. And I really like this article because it contributed a lot of like what has been done by Aduct and Downey back in 2008 with the computer experiment, where they had 4 different categories of words. It was negative thoughts, rejection, hostility, and neutral. And pretty much every high RS individual had some sort of reaction and were able to process the hostile and rejective words more and not the neutral words. That's about all I have time for, but this project was super fun to make, and I loved enjoying hearing about rejection sensitivity.